Hey everyone out there, it's Roy again, and yeah, nice talking to you. Last video I made was a little bit of I guess I'd say more of a drunken rant at the cancellation of the Oscar screening done by Louder with Crowder, and say I ended up finishing the drinking game out of rage and anger. So unfortunately, I guess he's been yeah, he got targeted by ABC and Disney there, but he's not going down without a fight. Was a good thing. He's definitely putting, I guess, the boots to him legally per se, and they'll be sicking their half Asian lawyer on them. So good luck with that, there, Disney. But they're gonna come in with like 30 different lawyers, like and like Mickey Mouse dressed, all dressed up. Ooh, look at those bastards! Ooh, make fun of us, will you? Anyways, I think everyone's probably done that joke, but South Park did probably the best. But there's a lot of things going on today. There's the testimony at Cohen against whatever happened to attorney-client privileges, eh? But anyways, I mean the guy's lied many times, so who knows what he's gonna fabricate, or hey, it might actually be true or whatnot. It's funny how they're going after the most smallest things. It's just like, at this point, after 2 years of just a ridiculous fake Russian investigation for collusion and stuff like that, dragging him through the mud from everything from pissing on hookers to, to fucking apparently molesting his own daughter, if you ask the Democrats or whatnot. They're so fucking retarded. I mean, at least if you had some serious evidence to go on. I mean, Roger Stone, I mean, there's people that are saying that he's guilty of threatening, I guess that they're going to call it witness tampering or whatnot, or, apparently lying to Congress, even though he was just a memory error that had no actual, like, replication. Like, it wasn't like he was lying to cover anything. It was something really, really small. And the fact they're trying to go after him for just trying to like get a interview with Julian Assange around the same time, where they would, like, Assange wouldn't really give Infowars or especially Roger Stone or any kind of like right-leaning outlet the time of day. So it's kind of interesting to see how it's going to go on, and I really don't think that it's like, even if Roger's found guilty for threatening or whatnot, even though he does it in his own kind of coy way when he's on Twitter and stuff like that, I don't see why he should spend the rest of his life in prison for it. It's completely political, and it's gotten to a point where even the CNN was like, they were trying to say, oh yeah, we were on a hunch. That's total bullshit. They even had the footage of them like working with the FBI is going out there and making sure he's got the right shot. Got to make it look all big bad Roger Stone. So it like taints the jury, and they think that he's like public enemy number one, or Alexei Stone Stonovich. I don't know. What's I'm not really into Russian names, and Vitch is probably like what, Polish or something like. I'm digging myself deeper here. I'm not too sure like where the last names all really come from, because nowadays you see people from all over the place. But anyways, I'm falling off topic here. But another thing that should be mentioned, one of the reasons why I'm probably going to start doing videos again, is just it's crazy, just the amount of disinformation in the media. And I will link, I highly recommend anyone who's actually paying attention in the videos I make to watch the latest Tommy Robinson documentary about John Sweeny, and just how freaking dishonest. Oh my god, he took him over a barrel. I gotta give it to Tommy. And I mean, I talked to a few of my friends who are in the UK or whatnot, but I always try to keep the politics down to a minimum, because I don't know what it is. It seems like, I mean, I love my friends from the UK and stuff like that, but a lot of them don't really see the significance of Brexit, and don't see the fact that they're taxed to death, and like, I would not want to live in the UK, and like it's, oh man. I mean, I want to go visit people there because I played a nerdy game, and it would be kind of cool to. I'm actually planning maybe a trip there in I guess 2020, So that'll be kind of fun to see my friends there and whatnot. But I have to save for 2 years just to be able to go to to London, just because of how expensive it is, and like because the Canadian dollar is like on par with Australia, but we're like our dollar's like worth like not that much compared to to the UK. I don't know exactly off the top of my head last time I checked, but it's I think it's going to be about a good 3,000. I got to save up to be able to do that. Plus, I'm planning on going to the Niagara Falls Comic Con here in Canada in June. So I'm going to take my sister to it because it's her birthday. So I figured she wanted to go, maybe see somebody famous. They got some good people there. But yeah, no, it's crazy over there. I mean, like when I look at the history of the British. Not so much as like the British government in particular, but like the UK over the like the when you compare it to World War I, World War II, I mean the resolve that the British people had was steadfast. It was all about Queen, the monarchy, the Parliament. Obviously the monarchy and the Queen are the same thing, but I mean like the monarchy and Parliament and British values and. Like no matter how much like Hitler thought that he would be able to break the spirit of the British people by all those aerial bombardments, all the V1 and V2 rockets. I mean, and like the British people were steadfast and were it angered them. They were ready to fight even more. I mean, one of my grandma's sister, I believe. She ended up, I think it was my great grandparents. They lost a lot of family in the bombings in London, and it's just horrible. Like they were told back in the day, like to stand under the door frames or whatnot, because they were like some of the strongest places that you could. But I mean, when you're getting bombed like that, it's almost impossible. I mean, I can understand why so many people use the London Underground as a bomb shelter. Pretty much, it's just horrible what they had to go through. And I mean, the resolve of the British people were to fight against tyranny, were to fight against a foreign power coming and making their laws or taking over things. I mean, when you look what happened to France, I mean, a lot of that stuff was the Vichy. But I'm actually really surprised to see that the Yellow Vests are still out there protesting and stuff. Because it gets to a certain point where you can only push a lot of crap onto people of a population, especially carbon taxes, high fuel costs. I mean, they're already taxed death over there. I mean, I think with this whole thing with Tommy Robinson has really just kind of, I mean, I would like to be able to tell most of the people who I know who are from the UK, but the thing is, it's more of an online game kind of thing that I play with them. I like run not run, but like co-run with other people. A clan that I've been in for like 10 years on RuneScape, so it's kind of a nerdy thing there. But I mean, like, I always try to keep politics out of that with them. But for anybody who is political and who actually would probably be watching this or subscribe to this channel, thank you very much, by the way, because most of the time I'm like, I'd go months without doing anything and then just post a long rant and anything that angers me. So I'm going to try to do I know I said like a couple times that I'm going to try to do a little bit more attention to videos and stuff like that, because there's a lot of different outlets and channels that anyone can really listen to. I mean, every one of them have their own better editing than me for sure, or editing whatsoever, because I kind of just do this stuff in one take. It's the way I like doing things. And it's crazy what they tried doing with Tommy Robinson. They tried setting him up with like a sex allegations with the one lady who he was working with, who they had a falling out with, and that just goes to show you the tactics of especially one of the was it like Love Not Hate or some stupid organization like that? That's all, that's a lot of these organizations, these NGOs. When they have these groups that come in, you always have to be wary of them. A lot of the times they're usually funded by certain people who are kind of famous, to say the least. This one just happened to be George Soros. I don't know. I know George Soros is like the end of it, and it's almost like they try to say, oh well, if you say anything about George Soros, then you're anti-Semitic. But that's bullcrap, because everyone knows that, like, if it's true, if he actually is funding these groups and he keeps being tied to it over and over and over again, um, it's it's not an anti-Jewish conspiracy. In fact, if you actually like look on there was a time where 60 Minutes interview where he actually, well, he didn't like say that it was like, he was saying that he was just fulfilling a thing in the market, and that it was like, one of, like, he had to do it or else someone else wouldn't. And he completely admitted to, like, the fact that he was like 15, 16ish, he was under an adopted guardian who took him around confiscating the property of Hungarian Jews. And so even later on in life, after he went through all the London education that he got, and all that wonderful globalist indoctrination, he has pretty much always been against Israel, or not really been against, just not supporting. He's, like, he's done a lot of different shady things, and it's not just, like, there's a lot of people that usually, and his son's probably going to take the mantle over that. But what's kind of crazy about what happened with Tommy Robinson is that they, like, I would not be surprised, just because the way the BBC works, that there's MI6, that there's government involvement in the defamation and the destruction of the image of Tommy Robinson. And yeah, that's not his, like, real name or whatnot, but I mean, the man has been through an intense amount of ordeal. I mean, like, they had him in solitary confinement. They've lied about him left, right, and center. They've sent Antifa groups to go out and attack him. And, if there was, like, 1/10 of the hatred that was put against Tommy Robinson, that was put to, like, let's say a public political figure or a leftist media personality, pretty much the British government and, the establishment would completely make the biggest thing out of it. And we see so many different cases where it's like any kind of global anti-globalist movement has always been, especially now, it just seems like the rhetoric that they try to use against it is, oh, he's or she is Islamophobic, or is racist, sexist, and insert ist here, as opposed to, people are, sick of having their prices for everything going up over these stupid taxations. They're sick of this regulation that's coming in from UN assemblies and treaties and agendas that are trying to, like, completely change the way that we actually, live, pretty much, where they don't want us to be able to eat meat. For some people it might actually be a good thing, but I mean, the way that they want to enforce it is, like, if you get caught with a hamburger, we're throwing your ass in jail. That's what it's going to come down to. Because, I mean, when you look at these, it's not a freedom-based, decentralized, localized agenda at all. And when you have that, you have, like, you look at, like, how things are kind of work. Like, look at your local farmers market, for example. You get people who live around in the area, and they may grow a bunch of different foods or vegetables, or maybe they're really good at doing certain crafts and stuff like that, or like, there's all kinds of different qualities or things that people specialize in a localized area, and they take that thing to the market and they get whatever they can from it, and that becomes the community marketplace, the agora, if you were to go so far into that. But yeah, no, it's interesting how just a lot of the stuff now is just geared towards demonizing people who just want to be able to have the entrepreneur spirit, who want to be able to just make life for a life for themselves and their family without getting taxed to death, without getting the police knocking on their door for the smallest little thing ever. And the thing about it is that it's, like I said before, like, there's this cultural Marxist agenda that keeps just getting thrown out there, and the intersectionality that's being taught in schools to, it's crazy. I mean, there's a certain amount of collectivism that you have to put up with, I mean, in a society, but it's gotten to a point now where it has just gone to an Orwellian agenda. I think it's because of Trump, because of this this just global movement. So I mean, here in Canada we have the PPC now, the People's Party of Canada. We had Maxime Bernier, and the thing is, at one point he didn't believe in the fact that there's like a globalist UN agenda that's taking over Canadian law. But now after he's really looked into this stuff. Dan Dix had an interview with him, and he was, at first he was like, "Oh no, I don't understand what you're talking about," like the shadow government he was talking about in the States. And now, through his Twitter, it looks like Bernier is actually, and he's also been doing some e-petitions too. I gotta give a shout out to Joe Hazelton. I really like his work. He does some great videos, and there's a lot of Canadians out there, like Canadian Libertarian. There's like, if you look at my subscriptions, I've got about 100 and some odd different subscriptions. So like most of my day, because my stupid back issues and stuff like that, like I am actually kind of looking into work. Like part-time here and there through like this kind of cool government program, so I am a little bit useful that way if I could just find something in my area or whatnot. So that might take some time, but hey, at least I'm even though I'm on ESPN, I'm in a lot of pain, I am trying to go out there to make sure that I'm actually kind of contributing as best as I can. Aside from that, I'm about 6 to 10 hours a day. I'm usually circulating through different types of media outlets or independent YouTube channels, BitChute channels, you name it. And it's at a point where I do think that we are getting really close to not so much as a civil war, especially up here in Canada, because a lot of the population is just waking up to this whole thing, and they're very weary about the U.S. kind of populism, mostly because we don't really have a Fox News outlet out here. I mean, what, Rebel Media? We've got independent YouTubers, but a lot of people are just unaware of that because everything is completely controlled by the leftist media here. They try to say like that they are right leaning, but they don't. It's almost like everything I've seen on CTV and everything like that, CBC, has just been these huge criticisms of Doug Ford. Not once have I seen any mainstream media outlet here in Canada say, "Okay, Ontario's like pretty much got one of the largest sub-sovereign national debts on the planet. We need to do things to make sure that we're not spending ourselves into oblivion." But no, CTV, all they're focusing on, are there going to be jobs lost from this, like, making it into, like, Ontario Health, as opposed, well, they've got about, like, here in Canada, just for people who don't know, they've got, especially here in Ontario, they say they do provincial funding covers a lot of the healthcare costs for each province, and each province has different, like, they don't all have the same system provincially. Some have a private public healthcare option, some have a public option, some have both the private and public option, but with like limitations to it. So so for me, I do believe that we need to have a public and private healthcare system. I do need that we need private options that compete on a basis where there's multiple different companies out there, and as long as they actually aren't just scam companies, like there should be regulations put in to make sure that they're not just taking people's money and then just not paying out or not being an insurance thing. And technically, the free market, if people have a bunch of different choices, and one of the choices that they buy into is really cheap or whatnot, but then doesn't pay them out or whatnot. And I mean, that's, if they're finding out they're not getting the coverage that they need, then they should be able to be like, okay, this company is corrupt, everybody else should know about it, and then they should lose out eventually because people go somewhere else. See, that's the thing, when you have a bunch of different choices, it gives incentive for other companies to be competitive, for one. And another thing is that if you have a public option, it still has a bit of a safety net for people there who don't have the money for things, and I can understand the argument, especially in the States, where you see, we have a tenth of the population as people in the U.S., and people in the U.S., I mean, it's almost kind of hard to get a public healthcare option that covers everyone and doesn't like put people into horrible mandates and stuff like that, and doesn't put people into long waiting lines or reduces the care that they receive. I mean, I do believe that we should have a bit of a safety net for people who aren't able to, to pay for things, and Like I don't like the idea of people having to lose their houses or stuff like that, just to be able to pay off healthcare bills. But at the same time, you don't want a whole bunch of people that don't really care about their health or whatnot. Like me, for example. I'm actually starting to get back into it, so you can tell I've maybe lost a little bit of weight from before. So, well, not last video, but from when I first started doing these videos, I was about like 440. I'm down to about 330 now, but I still got a ways to go. And it's not fair for people who don't have problems, who are healthy, productive individuals, which is why I see both sides of this issue, when it comes to healthcare and stuff like that, that don't want to have to pay for somebody that hasn't really taken good care of their health or doesn't have any intentions on taking care of their health or whatsoever, And so that's a huge burden on the system. And here in Canada, we can mediate it. Why? Because we don't have, we don't really spend a lot of money on our military. I mean, compared to the U.S., we pretty much have them to do most of the wars for us, A lot of Canadian military, the stuff we get sent over to, for peacekeeping missions and stuff like that. Or, the major operations in Afghanistan. And, hey, I have a lot of respect for anybody that goes into the military to serve their country. But I don't agree with what a lot of politicians do when it comes to sending those soldiers over there. Like, why are we sending our best to countries that don't give a damn? They don't care about human rights, and what are we supposed to go there and tell them? And as soon as we go there and tell them how to live, like how they should have a basic understanding of human rights and what that is from a Western set of values, they don't care. They're like, why are you here? Just give us money or, piss off kind of thing. They don't really care about what we're doing in certain countries. Like, why do we need bases in Afghanistan or freaking Libya or Syria or like any kind of places where we need to go to war or whatnot? Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, like here in Canada, we don't go as much, and we kind of do follow the UN thing, but I mean, the UN should be like, it's been what, like how many years? Like how many decades does it take for the UN to finally get that world peace that they were first originally mandated to create, I guess. I mean, the League of Nations failed, and the UN is probably going to fail too at this point. I mean, nowadays we have a lot of the technology, we have a lot of the we have a lot of the capabilities of banding together better than what we had before, especially if you compare it to like the 50s or 60s after the World War II. But it's crazy just how much it's gone to a point where it's like the 2030. If you look at it at plain value, it's got everything from gender equality to eradicating poverty and stuff like that, and that sounds pretty good. But the thing about it is, when you look at the actual policies and how they want to go implementing these things, and how they also use them in conjunction with like trade deals and stuff that have very little to do with trade and have everything to do with making sure that that they regulate certain parts of industries to such a point where it makes it impossible for small or independent, like mom and pop kind of organizations or companies to be able to make a lot of money, to be able to be successful. When it gets to the point where they can't, they can't make a pond on their property without having a $20,000 fine or something like that, it gets to a point where, yeah, I understand that there's a certain part of, we have to be kind of like mindful of the environment, but at the exact same time, there's plenty of companies that end up taking those grants and the money just does not go to where it's supposed to be. I mean, when you look at like how much infrastructure there is in the States that needs to be kind of done, I mean, I know Trump was wanted to put a little bit of money into infrastructure and whatnot when he signed that bill last year. And also the thing about the U.S. though is that it's like a lot of the times when they pass these bills, especially for the budget, it's a huge omnibus bill where they release it in the last little bit so that almost nobody can actually read what's in the thing. And then it usually has all kinds of crazy clauses in there that, I mean, the thing about Trump is that he's just one man. He, they send him in there like a bull in a china shop, and he's fired a lot of people. He's shooken up a lot of things. He's putting in some Supreme Court justices, and he can't get a break. Why? Because he's trying to with the German ambassador to the U.S. Who's gay. He is trying to do put international pressure on on countries like Iran and other countries around the world that criminalize homosexuality. And what happens? Oh, the media hates him for it. Like, here he is being called like all this crap because of the trans military ban. And I'm sorry, but if you're going for in the military, you see, for me, I'm kind of torn. I seen both. I understand both arguments here. You see, for me, I'm a civilian. I haven't gone into like, you know, military like action. I haven't, you know, done anything like that. So I mean, I can understand where people are saying that. Well, if they're you know, if they're not like if it's a trans person who is completely like able to do their duties, is completely physically fit and able to pass all the physical exams, because there's a high bar for especially some of like the special operatives, rangers, stuff like that. Like there's a certain high amount of dropout that they have, and then there's only like a certain amount of people that they need that are able to be smart, that are able to be maneuverable in any kind of situation. You know, like you gotta be able to adapt and all that stuff, and have survival training. And like there's a lot to it mentally, physically, and so there's a very high bar to set there. And I can understand from people who are actually veterans that say that, you know, it gets to the point where, you know, if you have somebody in your unit and they're not 100%, you know, comfortable with the situations, let alone their own, you know, because there is a high degree, sadly, of trans people who do commit suicide, and that's a sad thing. You know, and so that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I mean, you know, when it comes to Bradley Manning or Chelsea Manning, however, I think I just dead named or whatnot. I think that's a criminal offense in California. But, you know, there's definitely an argument to be made about on both sides. I mean, like what Bradley Manning did was, you know, kind of perceived by people in the military or veterans as putting their brothers in danger, putting their you know, other operators in harm. But at the same time, when you look at the collateral damage video about what they did to the Reuters, oh man, that was horrible, where they're even shooting the freaking van that came to go help them out, and there was apparently kids in there, and just you know, they just murdered a bunch of people. Like, that stuff that needs to be brought into public light. You know, I mean, it's definitely something that affected a huge portion of you know, I mean, like Bradley Manning, and then there was also, you know, Snowden. He like really released a lot of stuff there too. But I mean, like, it's at a certain point, it's like, when do we consider someone in the military, or whatever branch of the military industrial complex? You know, when is it a moral imperative that you have to say something, you know? And when you try to go to your superiors and they practically just shove it off and say, oh, you can't say anything, you can't divulge this information because, you know, whatever reasons. I mean, it's crazy how we're just so willing to accept the fact that the government does shady shit, and that if we piss them off, they have the right to come into your house and take you and throw you away into some cell somewhere until, you know, like, there's a lot of just really messed up things about when you think about how the way the society and the government works. But at the same time, how do you keep them accountable, you know? How do you do that without sacrificing people's lives, without, you know, sacrificing, you know, the public trust, you know, even if that like, it doesn't really seem that people who are high up in intelligence agencies or in the Five Eyes, for example, I mean, there's a whole kinds of stuff that they keep, like, who knows what kind of weird stuff that they're doing, you know? There's all kinds of stories and whistleblowers of people coming out and saying that they're, like, you know, spying on people, or, like, you know, they're, especially in, like, in the States, they had where they were, like, spying on, like, their loved ones and stuff to make sure they're not cheating. Like, I don't know, it's like at a certain point, when is it, like, when are we, like, going after the bad guys, and then when are we getting past that point where it's completely Orwellian? And, like, I mean, there's a lot of arguments to be made on not just both sides, but many different sides. I mean, you know, I find myself more kind of agreeing with the non-state statists, like the anarchists, the agorists, the voluntarists, the many different libertarian groups out there and stuff like that. Because I kind of find most of my stuff is more based on, I want kind of decentralization. I don't think that we should let a private bank control the printing of our money. It's one of the worst things that we've ever done. Here in Canada, 1974, I've said this many times in different videos. 1913, in the States, pretty much so many different other countries have fallen under the spell of either the International Bank of Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, all the stuff that's linked to the UN, practically so many different central banks that have taken over a lot of the stuff. Like, the reason why we don't have a lot of money is mostly because a lot of that's going to pay off of compounded debt that we apparently owe. When if you look at here in Canada, I think 8% of what we actually we're paying huge amounts of compounded interest on loans that we maybe spent 8% of, that we're paying back on a regular basis. And what scares me is that there's not a discussion on the fact that private banks own and control. Like, there's a board of 10 members on the Federal Reserve in the States that completely dictate the policies that they're going to do for economic policies. And that's scary. That is very scary. We had Stephen Palaz now, but we had Mark Carney that inflated our bubble here so that it's at the point where it's ready to burst, and he went off to the Bank of England. It's like, it's so crazy. It's almost like an evil Bond movie plot if you just but we're unaware of it. Most people, I'm sure people who have subscribed to this channel know what I'm talking about and understand completely what I'm talking, but it's crazy just how much that's we're not told about it. It's not taught in schools. It's not taught that we print money out of thin air, or that we just type them up on a computer. Our principal is practically nothing now. Paul Martin and many different prime ministers beforehand have all affected made laws to make sure that we had less and less principal in the bank that we had to keep, because there's a certain law where we were supposed to keep a certain amount of money in the bank for what's being lent out or whatnot. But it's at the point now where they type up some numbers on a computer and you back that loan with years and years of fucking blood, sweat, and tears from your own work. And I don't mean to get all Marxist or shit like that or anything, by that means. It's just how things are. And we've actually, we've allowed ourselves that. In fact, a lot of people don't understand that any kind of people who like socialism or communism, they always pay the banks first. They always pay the banks before they actually do anything for the people like they say they're going to in their wonderful utopia. And the problem with socialism and communism is that the very same people that push it, that say, oh, well, everyone else needs to pay more and more to make sure that the poor people are living in a nice, or at least a reasonable kind of living condition. And to a certain degree, I do believe that, it's good to be able to have that option for people to be able to donate if they want. There's a good group of people that if they had their taxes reduced and they had a lot more spending money, they would give to a charitable organization or put more money towards something that they believed would help people who are, to give out, not just as a wealth for monetary value, but, a wealth that's placed on the services that you render to your community. And, that's why it's kind of like, when it comes to collectivism, there's always that, aspect of doing the good for the benefit of everyone. And there's still a conservative values that still do believe to a certain degree that you need to have that community values. That's what the traditional aspects of conservatism really relies on. But it's to that effect of how do you go about it? And with the socialists and the communists, they always believe that bigger government, more taxation, more controls on what you can and can't do are the answer. And a lot of the times we see that that's just not not a good thing to do. A lot of the, like, I mean, I don't mean to be cliche, but look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. I mean, you know, Michael Moore tries to play Cuba off like it was the most wonderful place in the world, and you know, Americans only had to pay a couple, you know, like not too much for medicine for certain types of drugs and stuff like that. And hey, you know what? There's definitely a lot about the pharmaceutical companies that it's become more, not free market, but complete crony capitalism in the States. When you look at how big pharma, a multi-billion-dollar industry, has completely taken over a lot of the news in the mainstream. Like, even Fox, for example. I mean, on the right, I'm not defending any one particular you know, media outlet. I mean, whatever happened to just being, I mean, there's ABC, NBC, you know, all these different media outlets all over the world, and why can't we just have one that's as objective as possible? And I mean, it's sad when I actually have to go to RT to find out a lot about stuff that should be main news in Canada or in the US or whatnot. And you know, when it comes for them criticizing Russia, obviously they're not going to be criticizing old Pooty Poot too much, as George Bush used to call him. But it's definitely lacking now. And so with the depth of objective media, like we've seen with the BBC and how they've harassed and gone after Tommy Robinson for I mean, yeah, okay, he started the EDL and it turned into something that wasn't too pretty or whatnot, but he left it, and there's a lot of people who, and if you actually, like, listen to what he's saying, he's just concerned about the, you know, like, how the authorities, you know, I mean, like, hey, if there's a group of people that are doing something that is harmful and is illegal, and like, all this, like, talk about and freak out about the Me Too movement, well, where are the feminists that defend radical Islam? And that's an argument that I find the right is completely correct in having. You know, anyone who's conservative or even the alt-right or the far rights or whatnot, you know, I mean, like, they do, you know, except the Nazis, they actually like the the Islamic rules, you know, and hardcore conservatives like like some of the tenements of you know, of making woman kind of like, you know, and that's the people who are kind of more like who are more on the extremes. I mean, like, it's gotten to the point where they have to like outsource their hate crimes to Nigerians with American citizenship, like in the Jussie Smollett case, to be able to, or here in Canada, we had the fake hijab, you know, they had the whole thing where this woman, these kids, a little girl, and like her mom was in it and everything, and they're saying, oh, this Chinese Asian man, he come and he cut my hijab, he come and he bought my hijab and he cut it, oh, he cut the hijab, and then they find out that it was totally fake fucking news, bullshit, and, you know, of course, nothing happened. Never happened, and we have to play these like stupid hate crimes or stuff like that. But the thing is, there's so much frustration that's going on, especially here in Canada. There's people who are, you know, around the world, people who see who have escaped communism. I mean, I feel bad for all the people that got away from the communism of the Soviet era days, only to come here and have their kids brainwashed by cultural Marxism. And hey, you know what? There was a certain time when I was like, hey, there's rich people out there, there's poor people. I grew up in a severely poor upbringing, but I mean, I was smart enough to realize that a lot of that was because my parents were not exactly responsible when it came to a lot of stuff, especially when it came to like gambling and whatnot, and trying to like plan things out instead of, you know, being in a bad spot. And there was a certain time where my mom was she had a really bad onset of like multiple sclerosis kind of conditions, and she was having some real problems, and thankfully it's kind of gone into remission. And she's been able to go back to work and stuff like that, but she's been in a lot of pain. And so, you know, a lot of that has to do with me growing up and realizing that I wanted to change the world. I saw a lot of corruption. I was always against authority. And at that time, I thought that, well, if only I could do it, you know, if only me and my friends could do it, you know, we'd do it so much better than all those other people that, you know, completely screwed up horribly and killed a lot of people, you know, and I didn't really realize it because I was just more of it was more of the, I was more of like, I like the idea of taking down the establishment, of of creating a revolution that would be good and prosperous for all. But the more I looked into like just kind of the ideology behind people who are socialist, communists, and stuff like that, and just kind of the agenda. And after watching like lots of different alternative media sources and stuff like that, and getting different parts of history that they never taught in schools that were completely historically accurate for the most part, I knew that we were getting lied to. I knew that we were being sold a false sale of goods. And when I was, I started traveling around and stuff like that. So that was a big, that was a benefit to see like how people in different parts of Canada, like they're all had like different communities and stuff like that. And I really had a respect for people who would go out and find something that, let's say something that they were really good at, or something they really loved doing, and they made their money doing it. I bumped into, people who were doing like wood carvings, like just like the most weirdest things that you think that like, oh wow, that person was really into that. Or like successful musicians that happen to get a bunch of gigs on a regular basis and stuff like that, and still be able to pay their bills and stuff. And so I realized that, when you go for the whole collectivism, that there's a lot of the times where it's not about, like, the focus is not on the individual. There's a lot of policies that get put in because it's like, well, that's great that you have this skill that you're really good at and you want to pursue, but we can't hire you, or we can't, give you the training or whatnot, because we have to we have to allocate these resources or whatnot to somebody else of a specific minority, or, and it's not geared towards people on what they're able to produce well. I mean, a lot of the times you see high regulation when it comes to big government, and that's mainly done to stop entrepreneurs, small business owners, from being able to be very successful. I mean, when you get people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she talks about how I don't even know why I'm using her, because it seems like everybody who makes a video, talking about her, it's like Voldemort. I'm not even really a big Harry Potter fan, and I'm sorry if I'm angered anybody by saying that. I just don't understand how, like, 7 books or 7 movies or whatever, how many they made, and it takes like 5 or 6 for the character to get badass. You've lost my attention by then. So it's crazy, because it's at the point now where it's a lot of propaganda, it's a lot of brainwashing, and it's completely geared towards making people fearful to say there's only 2 genders, for example. That's a perfect example of how pretty much, not just like the media, the scientific, the educational facilities, it's ridiculous how much of just this culture is being pushed into a cultural Marxist kind of setting. And the thing is, I'm finding that when I always thought that those old conservative types are the ones that are the most racist, but no, they just want to be able to make a life for themselves and feed their families without having to pay a ridiculous amount of tax, without having to adhere to a ridiculous amount of social standards that the people who implement them don't even follow. I mean, I find that people who are on the left, who are very kind of, who don't really see the argument of a free market, of capitalism, of having like a system that rewards or punishes laziness, or like the will to succeed, for example. I mean, it gets to the point where these big government ideas are, you don't have to work as much, or you don't have to pay for certain services or certain things like that. You'll have everyone giving it to you, kind of thing. puts us in a really bad spot. It stifles innovation, for one, because it doesn't give people who are trying to make their own, like, who are very bright and creative and hardworking, it takes away from their ability to be able to produce and to make make a job for themselves and make other jobs for other people. I mean, a lot of these taxation things are, they always say that they're going to tax the rich, but the people, the really rich organizations, like take Amazon, for example, they've barely paid any tax in a couple years. And the bigger you are, the more exemptions you get. And small companies can't afford to compete with that. And when you lose the small business ownership and the entrepreneurship, and you take away that incentive, you severely damage your economy. I mean, the thing about socialism, like they say, is you eventually run out of other people's money. And as much as I can't stand Thatcher, I mean, she did a lot of really underhanded things. And in fact, actually, the reason why I was even born is because my grandparents had to move from Coventry when they shut down the steel industry there. And she started up the whole environmental movement, and she's known as Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, because she was taking away programs that they had in there since World War II to help people out. They had a nationalized kind of like dairy kind of thing, which was kind of close to what we have here in Canada, but was actually to the point where it was serving the people. And I mean, there's a lot of criticisms to be said about that. And I mean, she did kind of lead to the beginning of the destruction of the NHS healthcare system over there. And so that's sad, because that's a healthcare system that my great-grandparents paid into ever since World War II, and even before that, back when they had to ration their foods, back when they, didn't have the proper medicine, and they were going through a lot of crap, over the years, there was less and less money in the NHS healthcare system. And even though they paid into it by working, my great-grandpa was, he was an enlisted man. He went all over the place, even after World War II. He was, I believe he was involved in the military during the Korean War and stuff like that too. So, and my great-grandma Rose, I mean, they both worked their butts off. And when they got really old to the around the 90s or whatnot, they ended up getting put into like homes and stuff like that. And the NHS healthcare there was just horrible, and they ended up trying to take their property, take like all their possessions and stuff like that through a legal loophole that they were trying to but the thing was, my grandma had to go over there a bunch of times to do some legal proceedings to stop that from happening, and they almost did. It's a huge thing. They take a lot of old people's or people that don't have that much family and stuff like that, or know that their family is overseas. They'll try all kinds of stuff to take their homes and stuff. It's one of the most greedy property just fraud that goes on in London, and it's internationally known for being pretty much a country where they're allowed to make derivative bets on the market about whether or not people are going to pay off their mortgages, and they can do they do it in a fractional reserve kind of banking sort of way. So they're always making money, and the property is just a joke over there. There's a lot of hugely inflated asset bubbles over there. If anyone follows the X-22 report, or Max Kaiser, or Gerald Celente, what was it? Was it the Records guy? From what was it? The Death of Money, which is a great book, by the way. I highly recommend people to read that. And no, there's a lot of different people out there that know what it is for what it is. But the minute the media or any kind of organization or part in society tells you the truth, then they lose their power. People want to fix the. If they knew what was going on, if they were smart enough to be able to unite and say enough is enough. But we've gotten to a point now where there's so much apathy. It's people who don't really who don't care anymore. The nihilism is gotten to a very bad degree. So the people that do care are stuck in this swamp that are like, what the hell's going on? Why are people not seeing what's going? It's like, we're all heading off a cliff there, and there's no driver, and everyone's in the back of the bus being like, "Hey guys, there's no driver. We're heading off we're all gonna die if we don't, grab the steering wheel and try at least something to do, like stop it from going the way it is." But unfortunately, that's not how it's going. It's a very scary kind of downward spiral, and I wonder if it's like, it feels to me that we're getting closer and closer to that kind of electronic gulag that what was the guy Matt Drudge was talking about a couple years back, and it's gotten to a point now where they're like they had a congressional thing in the States asking the head of Google and like Facebook, Zuckerberg, if they're censoring stuff, and they're, "Oh no, we don't do that." And then they had the Democrat congressmen and women who are completely paid off, like 30 grand or whatnot. They're paid off by the same people they're investigating each year, and it's like they're saying, "Oh no, there's obviously no censorship here because you said there's no censorship here." I mean, how is Mark Zuckerberg? How is was IG Ping or whatever the guy's name is from Google? How is he not thrown in fucking jail now for lying through his teeth? I mean, like, and it's not as if the government and the spy agencies don't know what's going on, because they work hand in hand with these people and these companies. I mean. And it's not even just the American company. I mean, like, they're working with, like, Pakistan to go after people who are, like, blaspheming on social media to go have them executed. And I mean, like, how can Twitter or Facebook or any of these companies say that they're for the people and that they're for free speech? It's at the point now where they may have said that they were free speech, but anybody, despite whether or not you are informed about what's going on between globalism versus nationalism, whether or not you're on the left or right or anti-authoritarian or completely authoritarian, you got to realize by now that there is no such thing as free speech on the main social media platforms now. And you have to kind of keep that into consideration. I mean, like, they are banning. Well, maybe it's because there wasn't a whole lot of really mainstream conservative voices out there. There was a good number of them, though, and there's more and more new channels popping up. It's like whack-a-mole, and that's why I think a lot of people on YouTube, I mean, YouTube seems to be kind of one that isn't as bad as, like, Facebook and Twitter, and but they're still pretty bad. Like, anybody who has a YouTube channel for a long period of time, and all the copyright strike systems that is just completely egregious. It's it does not look like we have a good chance here. I mean, but we got BitChute, we got a lot of other stuff that I do think that if people realize that we have, it's getting to the point where people are starting to realize now that Facebook isn't as cool as it used to be. People on YouTube are switching over to BitChute, especially ones with conservatives. But the thing is, they're going after people who are even on the left, but they don't toe the main party line. And it's funny how YouTube has been going after anybody with a political opinion who's, who they seem as, like, with their trust and safety councils and all that bullshit with, like, Twitter and stuff as being potentially, like, it's not, like, they have their algorithms making, like, hey, the recommended works for a lot of small channels. Like, I've actually gotten a good portion of, like, the 170 some odd subscriptions that I have on this channel that I constantly, check as much as I can. And I mean, I even give out money too, because I'm one of those people who I pick, like, I don't have a lot of money to give. I'm on disability. That's what sucks about it. So when I do, it's a very small amount. Or I buy a hat or a t-shirt or something like that. I got plenty of shirts and stuff like that. And that stuff, it's nice to be able to support those people, because there's a lot of people out there that are really doing it. And, you don't realize how much that those couple extra dollars that you may throw, and the good thing is there's a lot of places out there. If you buy, like a lot of people, they'll go and they'll buy, like, brand name stuff that's made from a sweatshop from, like, I mean, like, look at me. I don't give a damn about my outward appearance, because I'm just a good-hearted, funny-natured, down-to-earth guy that, I don't like hate people or whatnot like that. I definitely understand where people are coming from. I like to have those arguments. I like to have those debates. But there's definitely a wide variation of people out there that do care, and or don't care, or have their own beliefs or whatnot, or maybe they think that talking politics is gay. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are like that. They just want their sports. They just want to get home, put their foot up on the fucking couch, and eat dinner and go to bed. Maybe watch a movie every now and then, or. But it's crazy how much like technocracies, especially companies that make these algorithms, and you have your cell phone with you at any given time or day, and all you have to do is talk about something on your cell phone now, and practically all the terms and services that you have, your cell phone has become little brother. And that's why I refuse to get a cell phone. I find myself at the point where it's better to just get a landline and have an answering machine. I mean, it sucks because unless you're going out somewhere where you need it, or, you're really busy, or if it's for a job, or, if you have kind of like a sales service or something like that, then yeah, I understand why people have a cell phone. But it's so easy to get really kind of trapped into the whole kind of spy grid of it. And it sucks too, because they make it like, they make it really hard, because like, I mean, it's easy for me to be like, oh yeah, well, screw those technocrats, and they'll never know what I'm doing. But I'm on RuneScape like at least a good 10 to 12 hours a day while I'm also researching stuff, and it's I'm pretty much caught in the trap of the because when I think about it, I often kind of like wonder. I'm playing a game where I actually put time in, and I actually get like a decent amount of resources, enough to actually like make it able for me to do stuff in the game, which is like, I just wish like, reality was like this, but no, we've got, central private banks controlling everything and making it so that you just can't go out and sell something and make money or come out with a business. You have to go to, like, you can't cut that person's hair, even though you may be good at cutting hair. You have to go get a year to two at a beauty salon place or whatnot, and get your credentials. So, then you have to charge like $20 to $40 for a haircut, depending on the sex, the gender. Where's like, I don't see a lot of like, why don't they freak out about that, about the whole, like, but obviously like men are just kind of like cut it off for the most part. Unless you get those, like, the people that are, like they're kind of, haircuts. They're a dedicated follower of fashion. But, it's, I mean, for people that like their hair done a certain style and stuff like that, by all means, I mean, that's cool. I mean, but it's at the point where it's like, why can't that person who's really good at cutting hair just cut hair and make money out of, like, their house or whatnot? But at the same time, you need to have like some sort of review system, so that people who have a bad review there, or if they can't cut their hair, then they should be held personally responsible for that horrible job that they did, or that, so that way at least people know. I mean, like, I see that as the answer. I see localization, decentralization, kind of more of a free market value, any kind of different types of like ideologies out there. I mean, the thing about going past the whole left-right paradigm, and going, even for me, when I talk to people about being kind of like leaning libertarian, even though I'm kind of more of a center-right, but I'm more anti-authoritarian, they think I'm just talking gobbledygook. Or if I bring up something like voluntarism, or, if you even talk about somebody about anarchy, most people just think, anarchy in the UK! They're not all about thinking about, what it's like to not have that giant boot of the state on the back of their neck. Some people can't even conceive of it. They just think of that whole, spray paint can, red spray paint can of the anarchy symbol tagged on buildings and stuff, and the whole punk rock vibe that it has or used to have with it. Now it's more Antifa, and I don't really think they're into punk rock. More like punk jazz. I'm sorry, there's probably jazz punk out there, and I'm sorry for anybody who listens to that. I probably pissed you guys off, but I guess maybe Taylor Swift's into doing some punk songs. I mean, it seems to be the songs of oh, I probably angered more people now, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, for people out there who are actually paying attention. But, like, I've gone on another, like, hour rant, but this is just how I kind of feel about things, and, like I said, go to the Tommy Robinson channel. You gotta read what they did with the whole panorama thing. That was just brilliant, and I love how he made it so that like he completely baited him by saying he was gonna do like they did the fake text thing, which they could have easily like verified, because you think BBC, the purveyor of all that is wonderful and objective with British news, that they would be able to check that, but it was the most like dirty journalism that they could ever do, and Tommy Robinson was smart enough to expose. But I really do have to think that if some of the people who worked with Tommy Robinson before were malicious and wanted to say some bullshit or whatnot that wasn't true, they could have easily taken him down. He'd be another person on there that would have been on their hit list that didn't make it. Like, Milo's still out there, but he doesn't have nearly the following he has, but he's still out there doing his thing. And he's actually done some kind of funny public trolling stuff where he's like dressed up as like, oh my god, the Blasey Ford was hilarious. And I think he's also like dressed up as Elon, what's her name, the chick from Michigan or whatnot, yeah, who wants like Sharia law and married her brother, and you can't make this shit up. Oh my god. Well, I guess it's also creepy to see how many people who think that incest is okay now. Like, honestly, like, this is kind of embarrassing, but if you go to like YouPorn or whatnot, or like porn sites or whatnot, why is it that like certain countries, or they always have like this weird section of like it's almost like they're trying to get people to watch incest porn, and there's just something really fucked up about that. I mean, hey, for people who are into the weird shit, I mean, I'm all, whatever you do in the fucking recesses of your own bedroom, man. I mean, let your flag fly and all that shit. But incest is where I draw the fucking line, man. Like what the fuck? I mean, that's some pretty weird shit. That's like something that is like completely unhealthy, that will like destroy families and shit like that. But porn loves it because, of course they do. They're all a bunch of fucking, cousin fuckers, brother fuckers. I don't even want to know, man. And you guys don't even want to probably go down that road too. It's just, I cannot believe that shit. That's why I can't watch porn anymore. I'm like, god damn it, what are you trying to make me watch? Like, shit. They're having a fucking lesbian porn. They don't want it to be mom and fucking like daughter, or fucking grandma and daughter. Like, what the fuck is going on there, man? It's crazy. Some weird fucking shit out there. I never thought I'd get to a point where I actually appreciate the people that like those tentacle porn, because at least it's not as fucked up as that shit. I mean, I don't think it should be banned and shit like that. I mean, obviously there's people that are into that, and it's obviously more of a role play thing, but I think it does it's kind of like them trying to put like breakup of the family and shit like that, because like incest is like how you get fucking like families like put in a fucking children's aid service and like wardens of the state, because obviously you can't be in a normal environment when everyone's fucking each other, and like they go for like a sleepover at one of their friends' place, and you find out that they're like, it's the one chick that blows everyone or whatnot, and then you find out that she's getting like, fucking molested and shit like that. It's crazy. And it's funny how like it's like completely liberal and lefty to promote that kind of weird fucking porn fetishes and shit like that nowadays, because it's like, oh, well, we have to do it this way because feminism and empowerment and stuff like that. But yet it's like completely the kind of stuff that leads to like future Me Too movements and whatnot. Makes absolutely no sense to me, man. I just see like the behind what the hidden meanings are to everything, and that's one of the reasons why I just kind of see the lefty insanity for what it is, and kind of over time it's taken me a long time to see those points and exactly what that entails. I mean, hey man, what people do if they're into polyamory and stuff like that, that's that's their thing. But for me, I'm kind of like at the point now where I know I'm a good person. I know I have a set of personal responsibilities that I always try to do the more responsible thing. When I was younger, I didn't care about that stuff, and I just wanted to see the world burn, pretty much. But, I mean, I went and traveled and saw a lot of cool people and really kind of, like, worked a lot of different jobs and stuff like that, and saw how people just want to, on the most part, just want to live, They just want to feed their families, and, they don't want government's big bureaucratic boot in up their ass while they're doing it, And I've seen more and more that, less government means less bureaucracy and less corruption. I mean, obviously, you can have a small government that, doesn't take care of the lesser misfortunate people. And I do have, I do have sympathies for people who are in a bad situation, people who are on the left or whatnot. In fact, there's a lot of, some of the people in my clan or whatnot, just because they know that I'm right leaning, but they also know that I have a lot of respect for them, and that I won't I won't make fun of them or get angry at them for having, I have people who I talk to who are devout communists, and so we have these great, awesome discussions, and sometimes they make some good points about things, about how the corruption is rampant and how we may not ever be able to really save this whole kind of trend towards technocracy and collectivism and hatred towards people of, they try to say, don't be racist. Okay. I don't want to be racist. Shut up, white male. It's like, what? Come on. And then it's like, how are we supposed to set this pyramid of, oppression Olympics? It's like, who decides who is on top, who needs to be the more protected class than the others, and when you get into that thing, you're putting yourself into this victimology. And there's a lot of people who I see who have legit problems, maybe they don't do too well with women, maybe they don't have a really good self-esteem, maybe they don't like their body and stuff like that, or maybe they're just in really bad places, maybe they had a loved one die or some shit like that, or maybe they just have they're really kind of into the whole kind of entertainment, you have to believe what everyone else says, you got people looking over their shoulder making sure you're saying the right things on Facebook and stuff like that. It's easy to get put into that kind of brainwashing, mind control mentality. And for me, I like to be able to kind of get people to think outside the box, because a lot of the times people think, oh, well, the world, everything's corrupt, we need more money for healthcare and stuff like that, ergo more money, more taxation, more control, more big government, and for me, I like to make people think, well, hey, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a free market base, because that's a system that we've had for a long period of time, that even though this, I get people that are like, oh, well, how about all those rich people or whatnot that don't pay taxes and stuff like that? I'm like, yeah, no, I agree, that's a problem, but that doesn't mean that bigger government that rewards people who are ridiculously rich, who get away with these loopholes and stuff that don't have to pay taxes, well, they use that to control markets and to weed out other competition that just turns it into a one choice fits all. If you like it, then you either get, your voice gets marginalized, your vote gets less representation when you start making your country's policies based on UN agendas and stuff like that. They do not want, just look at the EU, for example. How many countries have either refused a lot of the EU agendas, and they just keep making them vote over and over and over again? They're stuck in it. And they never had a choice into whether or not they wanted to have their future and their lives dictated by unelected officials like Juncker. If you look at Juncker's history, I mean, it's funny how the UN and how the left is talking about how horrible and neo-Nazi Trump and Bolsonaro and all these movements in Hungary and stuff like that, are when Juncker was pretty much the heir to one of the biggest Nazi freaking heirs, and it was his whole family line. If you really look into it, they were really involved. In fact, I think they even made Juncker airplanes for the Nazis back in the day. I mean, oh my god, it's pretty damning. And I just think a lot of people aren't told that. They don't have that research, or they're not willing, and a lot of the times people will go off of what the news says. Regular people who don't question the media, and that's what I do like about Trump. He's made people in the States and BBC with the demonization of Tommy Robinson, people are waking up over there. I mean, heck, if Tommy Robinson was saying, hey, I hate all the races and stuff like that, and I want to exterminate the the Muslims or whatever insert group here, then I'd be against it. And I think a lot of people would be against it, and he would have been laughed off the stage. But the thing is, he's just drawing attention to rules that are being broken, and the fact that for years and years there was just vast amounts of child sex trafficking rings that went on without any kind of involvement for fear of being racist in the UK. That is a legitimate concern. I mean, that's something you don't want to happen when you have to worry about the safety of, of like your future of your kids, or even and it's weird because it's almost at the point now where people who say bad, like, who even, like, in a conversation outside of their workplace can get fired for, the most stupidest things, for having an opinion, for saying that mass immigration is a bad idea, which historically is usually a bad idea. I mean, it didn't work too well for the Romans. It didn't work too well for the Armenians. It didn't work too well for a lot of different insert groups here. I mean, if you don't have a way to make it so that there's like an integration process, or a set of values that people adapt, then you're definitely putting more fuel for the fire. And it's sad to say, and it's not like 100% always the case. There's always been times where for whether or not it's real refugees, for example. I mean, you have here in Canada, for example, we had during the 80s Ukrainians who came. I think we have 2 million out of the 30 million or 40 million probably by now, with all of Trudeau's skullfuckery, that are against Putin because, well, they grew up in that kind of communist kind of upbringing. They know how bad it was to live behind that Iron Curtain. And I really don't think that this is being taught. Like, the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn should be, like, taught in every single, I guess maybe in, like, high school, even, if you want to go there. Not so much as waiting for college and university. I mean, when they're trying to push Engels and Marx more in university and stuff like that, it's a dangerous ideology. A lot, like, I mean, people say, okay, Nazis, for example, are the worst things on the planet. And yeah, they're pretty bad. I don't like them. I don't support them whatsoever. I'm very against any kind of authoritarian regime. And if you look at how the same tactics that are used by the communists were used by the fascists in varying degrees. But the thing about, if you look at the National Socialism, it was pretty hardcore. And if you had Jewish sentiments or sentiments towards minorities, or if you didn't want the rule of a dictator over everything of what's going on, but the thing is, a lot of the German people, though, were left alone. They were told by the Nazis, "Oh, you are the race of the future. You people are wonderful. We need more of you to go and work and stuff like that." And that exuberance was felt by the Soviets and also by the Chinese too. I mean, Mao's farm brigades that they had there, like they would like try to raise and fake the quotas as much stuff that they could grow, and to such a point where they left absolutely no food for themselves. And they were thinking, oh well, we're sure we're gonna get some of this food as kickback, but no. They got none of it. A lot of them starved to death. It was given to different places and sold for very, very cheap to the Soviet communists, and they kind of had their own kind of interchangeable thing where it didn't become about the worker, and it didn't become about the average person. And the thing about it is, when you get to a point where you try to demonize a class of it got to the point where they were demonizing anybody who owned property. And that is so ridiculous. That's not somebody who's the top rich 1% or 0.00 whatever percent, if you want to get really statistically accurate or whatnot. They go after anybody who owns land. Anybody who has made a life for them, that has worked hard, that has put their blood, sweat, and tears and knowledge, for example. I mean, you have to have some sort of competency when you are running a business. You have to have a lot of different ideals and kind of ways of going about things. You have to be able to handle money well. You have to be able to handle conflict resolution well. You have to have a PR kind of advertisement. There's so many different types of ways. There's the marketing, and like for bigger companies, marketing itself is just a whole. It turns into the psychology, because they know exactly how the brain works, how people think on average, the public moves in certain types of trends and stuff like that, and that is a good way for people to make money off of it if they know what they're doing and stuff. But it's also a very form of if you use it within a government sense, like if you look at the fact that the Nazis were freaking horrible, and the thing about it was that I think even Stalin said that he regret taking over all of the economy at first, as opposed to Hitler, who they took over the government. They got elected. They had the Reichstag fire that was most likely a false flag that they blamed on a mentally retarded person, and they used that as a false flag. And a lot of people don't realize historical accounts of when false flags were used or were purportedly used to there's a lot of evidence to support it, to propel a political agenda. And the thing about Hitler too is that 10 years before he was actually elected, he tried to start up a popular revolt and was imprisoned for it. And so because he was imprisoned for it, and he was able to make Mein Kampf, and he was able to, because of the German prison system at that time, he was still able to do a lot of the stuff that got him more and more popularity. So yeah, he was kind of a populist in that regards, but he didn't say, okay, well, he had a pretty much like a list of how to be, what it was like to be German, what you had to do to be Nazi, and the whole the Hitler Youth and horrible stuff like that. Like, they were completely brainwashed into an ideology, but they were more encouraged to be German. Now, the Soviet style of things was 10 times worse than the whole the Nazi regime. If you were a Soviet citizen, like, you had to be not just wary of having a thought crime, but you had to make sure that, like, your neighbors, like, it got to the point where they broke up the family unit to such a point where they were tattling on each other, where they were training the kids. Oh, your parents are probably, against the wonderment of Mother Russia. So, if you hear them saying these and these words, then tell us. We'll give you a nice little reward, but your parents will be thrown off to the gulag. And I mean, like, the German soldiers, like, after World War II, like, okay, the ones that did some horrible crimes were, punished. Some of them not so much when you look at Operation Paperclip, but they were able to go back to, the ones that did survive, and go back to their families and stuff in Germany. And, the whole trying to figure out what to do after World War II, and, it was obviously a hard time for them economically, because, well, they owed all the governments, for going to war, pretty much, just like they screwed up in the World War I. But, and obviously there was a huge kind of, like, after World War II, the German people were, like, obviously making sure they had nothing to do with Nazism, as much as they tried to tell people that they weren't involved with it. Merkel. But anyways, but if you look at the Soviets, when they returned home from World War II, they were instantly given 10 to 15 year, unless they knew people high up and were able to pull strings, you went to go fight and almost die for your country. And if you look at the World War II, if you look at the Stalingrad, for example, or any of the many different battles that they had when the Germans were pushing further and further east into Russian territory, the Russian fighters were severely under-equipped, were severely, they had the manpower, but they did not have the militaristic capabilities and the awesome power that Germany had when it came to military might. But, they still managed to fight tooth and nail, and that spirit of the Russians is what made it impossible for, made it a stupid idea for Hitler to, attack the Eastern Front. But, luckily he did, and that's a good thing. So, but the thing was, the Soviets, they had such a more hardcore society that was very authoritarian, where if you even thought out of line, you would be branded an enemy of the state and disappeared and barely fed. Like the rations there, like it's amazing how anyone survived the gulags. What they were given, and a lot of the times they had to mix in their own crap. They had to mix in all kinds of horrible stuff just to be able to, get some sort of calories out of it. And a lot of people died. It was the most horrid conditions ever. And we get told about how horrible Nazis were the entire time we're in school, and culture. Anything that's attributed to Hitler is just the worst thing ever. But anything that's attributed to Karl Marx and his horrible ideas that helped kill millions and millions of people, that's completely fine. And I think we should, have more of a freedom-based approach of our societies. Make sure that we eliminate crony capitalism. If a bank fails, then let them fail. I mean, yeah, it'll hurt a lot of people, but on the bright side, it's better than spending more and more money of taxpayers' dollars to bail out companies that have no incentive to stop doing what they were doing to begin with. And that's what happens with collectivization. When you have a big bureaucratic government, it's a lot more easier for millions and billions and trillions of dollars to go missing through all kinds of seedy corrupt practices than it is for a decentralized kind of form of system where the people who are making any kind of money or who are running things are running it because they have those skills. The ones that are paid a decent amount of money are paid that because they are worth that in that government or in that society or in that business or under whatever kind of system you want to think of here. And they're there because they do a good job, and they do a good job because they're either doing well for their community or they're doing well for their business, and that the people who are working under them or their customers or anybody that deals with them in that kind of scenario or even competitive rivals know how well that they're doing because of how good their service is. And that's how we should judge things by. We shouldn't judge people's worth in society based on how much money they have. It should be more based on what kind of services they provide to the community. And also, which a lot of people will say, oh, that's collectivism right there. But I mean, when you look at things in a decentralized kind of setting, like people in that community are actually they're all an integral part. Like they have a deeper meaning, knowing that they're actually going to be doing something, that they have that extra capital that they're not being taxed to death from under a collectivized system, that if they have that extra money and they want to contribute, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. If they don't want to work for a certain bit of time and live off of their savings or whatnot, they don't have to do that. But in a communist system, like take China, for example, if you aren't productive or if you don't work, then you get sent to a labor camp to work. And if you don't work in the labor camp, well, you just might happen to go missing, if you know what I mean. It's a very scary system to go down, and it's frightening to see how much this like postmodernism, cultural, Marxism, and identity politics, which are the main three things that I say over and over and over again in these videos, but they are the main threats, aside from the private banking central skullfuckery system that we have, the UN agendas, the trade deals that have very little to do with trade, have more to do with intellectual property rights and making sure you don't post those horrible memes. Those horrible memes. How many news organizations and governments have fallen from the power of memes? See, it's scary when I start thinking like this and talking like this as a joke, because then, who knows, I think I might, like, if I ever went the other way, if I was back in my high school days and ever got power, I could be like the next Alexandria Occasional Cortex. I'm using that from now on. Thank you, David Knight. But anyways, it's I've been talking on for now an hour and a half almost, and for me, this is just like a conversation that I don't really have in my head all the time at any given moment in time. So thank you very much for staying this thing. I mean, everyone's like, oh, if you want a good YouTube channel, if you want to reach people, you have to like cut it up into like 10, 12-minute segments, and I'm like, it's not gonna happen. I like to rant. I like to talk about things. But for anybody who's like actually listening to me for this long period of time, I'm definitely well versed in what I believe, and I'm always like up for listening to other people's perspectives. But I haven't seen anything that actually really makes sense to me. I mean, a lot of the times when I talk to people, they're always trying to be like, "Oh, big government is the answer." Rich people are bad, or a whole bunch of like, "Oh, the UN is only there to do good in the world" and stuff like that. And no, they're not. No, they're not. It's pretty easy once you do some actual like research in there to find at least the both sides arguments, or even more. That's where you want to kind of like look and see whether or not you agree with it or not. I mean, in theory, and a lot of my friends are like, "Oh, in theory communism works." It's like, yeah, in theory a lot of stuff works, but we don't have that we only have a couple systems that we've developed right now that not developed right now, that we've developed over time, that work, that don't penalize people for trying to do as much as like for trying to excel, and also but I mean, like, now a lot of people are in their dead end jobs. I mean, it's almost like, if a degree doesn't really mean much nowadays, and we are kind of going into a bit of a decline, even though we've got all this technology. A lot of people are not using it to inform themselves, because they say, "Oh, you don't believe everything you hear on the internet, do you?" And it's like, well, you don't believe everything you hear on the nightly news, do you? I mean, you can say the same thing back to them nowadays. I mean, there used to be a time when there was objective media. It's dead now, and so I like looking at alternative media. I like watching people who have their own kind of perspective and stuff, and seeing like the other people in the alternative medias, and like there's like tons of different types of conflict, or different differences in views and stuff like that exist out there. But it's up to you to find which ones you find entertaining, which ones you find informative, and which ones aren't just going along talking points. The ones that are actually saying, okay, this is the other side's argument, this is our side of the argument, and But I mean, you don't get that objectivity anymore, and I mean, it's very rare that you can find news organizations that can actually claim that nowadays. It's a very sad state that we are in, and I'm gonna leave it here because hour and a half's gone by. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I've just been doing my own thing there. I'm gonna try to do more of these videos on a regular basis. Hopefully the Cohen testimony shows out to be a joke for what it actually is, because it's funny how, like, if anybody else, let's say if someone was going against Hillary Clinton, for example, if someone was going to testify against Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, and they had been caught openly lying to Congress beforehand, would the mainstream media take their opinion or what they had to say seriously, without saying the fact, oh, well, this person's lied under Congress many different times, who knows what they'll lie about next, kind of thing, like once a liar, always a liar kind of thing, But no, we don't get that criticism. You might get it in maybe like a side panel on like a group of people on CNN, and that one person will get like death stare from all the other peoples on the panel. You're not supposed to say that! You're never coming on here again! Which is practically what happens. You can't really have people an objective opinion anymore, because you say something that the other side doesn't like, and they get you thrown off mainstream media, or the censorship now, which is just ridiculous. And once again, anybody that's like, you obviously deserve a medal for listening to me this long, but I definitely recommend going to see the the Dramarama that they had, the Tommy Robinson, one of his news videos. It's banned off of Instagram and Facebook because, well, of course it is. And it's on YouTube, and I'm sure on a few other sites out there, probably like Minds, or people will definitely upload it because of just the fact that everything's going to censorship right now. And so hopefully I do kind of, I like to say that I could like say that people are going to eventually go towards those alternative platforms. I'm going to start probably posting more videos there. I've just been kind of posting on YouTube because nobody really knows me. I'm one of those guys that just, I like to, when I do have the time, I like to go to other people's channels, like Chase the Patriot, like a lot of smaller channels, out there of people who are trying to do what they can, like Joe Hazelton and Canadian objectives. Like, find people, if you can, either around your own area or internationally, depending on what your interests are. And support them. I mean, Michael DeBari, I bought a shirt off, a hoodie off of him or whatnot, to support him, because if you look at like what he does out there in Louisiana, like he really, like, I may not agree with 100% on a lot of the stuff, like, well, on everything that he says and stuff like that, but he's out there, fighting for conservative values, and I respect that. And he's also talking to people who, are, when you look at the videos, there's people that get it. There's a lot of people that get it, but then there's also a lot of people that are brainwashed too, and it takes a lot of balls to go out there in Louisiana, and like New Orleans with a bunch of drunk people and stuff, and trying to create change and change minds. And so maybe I'm just talking into a camera here. Maybe this channel will never really go anywhere. I mean, it hasn't really shut up in the few 3-4 years that I've had it. But I mean, like, aside from when I first started, it was more kind of like, I wasn't doing the face kind of cam stuff. I was doing certain topics that I was going and focusing on, and concentrating. Like, a couple of those videos I was doing for weeks and months, and almost a month, I mean. And it was just like that one was the debunking the climate change one. I wanted to do a societal manipulation series, a economic collapse series, and a few other things like that. But I just I kind of just changed the format, kind of went with this, because once the censorship started kicking in, and it was really apparent that the Silicon Valley nut jobs were going on the warpath, then I just kind of realized that there really wasn't much that I could do. I mean, there's so many different channels out there that have said it many times better than I could ever say, with better editing and better camera and different skills that they have. Maybe, other people that kind of pitch in to help the videos be good and stuff like that. So I've just been supporting them as much as I can, and anybody who's watched this for as long as you can, maybe you guys should look at my subscriptions or whatnot, join a few that you may not actually have on there. Mind you, there are channels on there that I have for like gaming stuff like that too, and whatnot. And I also do kind of subscribe to other channels on the left who I don't really agree with, but I like to hear what kind of crazy spin they're going to put on their arguments against what's going on, especially with Trump. Like, oh my God, you can't do anything in the eyes of the left that's good. Even though if Obama did half the stuff that Trump's done so far, he'd be like a legend. But it's funny because a lot of people, if you ask them, like they did a couple of videos of them asking people in like California who the current president is, and a lot of people think that Barack Obama is still president for some reason, even though there's like all this stuff about Trump. So if it's gotten to the point where people don't even know who their leader is, it does make you wonder if it's even worth saving. But I do think that there's a chance, and I do think that once people, the thing about history is that once people get put into a position where bad stuff happens to them, or they see how horrible policies affect them, like I'm sure everyone in Venezuela now knows that if they had free elections that was actually like decent elections, that they would probably not vote for the same people that made it, so that they lost 30 pounds and their kids have probably died from malnutrition or gotten some sort of, horrible disease from it or something like that, from, living in a place where they, completely oppress you and stuff, where you see the reality of it. And that's why I'm wearing this hat. And I mean, I have transgender friends and stuff like that, and people who believe in the whole 52 genders things. And I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I don't believe that we should throw out the thousands of years of biological and objective science that we've had for, forever pretty much, just because it's 2000 and whatever current year and it hurts someone's feelings. I mean, just because you say something, I mean, it doesn't actually make you that thing. There's a reason why we have a male and female DNA. No matter what, if a male tries to convert into a female or vice versa, they're still going to have the DNA that makes them biologically male or female. But I mean, there's technically the hermaphrodite kind of thing, or like the telomeres that they have, that there's like the XX and the XY, the mutations that both of them have. One is more rare than the other, but they're still a very, very small percentage of the population. In fact, that's what geneticists, I mean, this isn't me. I'm not a scientist. This is just, I've looked at, Watson studies and people have, like stuff like that. And, unfortunately, it's more of a genetic mutation, which is what it's considered. And, I mean, hey, you know what? I'm all for if you want to put like other or something like that, but I just think it's stupid if you're going to start like saying that like doctors when they deliver, when you give birth to a baby, and a doctor's like, oh, or a nurse is like, oh, it's a baby boy or a baby girl, and that's something that should be like despite all the whole gender nonsense, you should be happy, like you should be like glad that you brought a life into this fucking planet, and you're going to love that thing no matter what, no matter what kind of, if they decide to change their gender or want to be called whatever down the road. That's the most important thing, and that's, and I think a lot of people know that, but it's weird how a lot of that stuff gets kind of like, I mean, I have a friend who is actually, I don't want to talk too much about it, but like they have had a real problem with their gender identity and stuff like that, whether or not they want to be female or male, and other people too who are a guy who was male who was glad to be kind of a cross-dresser, and like I was still prefer like male pronouns and stuff like that. Like, it's impossible for somebody to go up to a stranger who you don't know, and it's like somebody who you either don't know is a trans, because some of the trans people out there, like take Blair White for example, like I would not know Blair White was a man if she came up to me and I didn't know who she was or whatnot, or if I was on like a bus or whatnot. And in that case, in the societal kind of element of things, it doesn't really matter, because you don't know, you just assume that it's a person from an opposite gender. But if you see someone that's obviously what looks like, a man, if you see a guy like me with a giant beard and I'm sitting in a pink tutu on the damn bus, you're going to be like, okay, I don't know if that person, like, what do I call that person? And then, if you have a conversation and, like if they're like, okay, well, what do you want to be called? It's not like they're going to know. They're not going to know what to call you. They're not going to call you like, know what to call you, like man, or sir, or ma'am, it's ma'am! It is ma'am! But anyways, it's like, and how is that person supposed to telekinetically know what pronouns that person wants to be called by? It's a real kind of weird position we've put ourselves in with this whole intersectionality nonsense and all the oppression Olympics and pyramids of who's supposed to be more oppressed than others and stuff. It's just gotten to such a crazy point. So I'm going to leave it there. Like I said, hour and 37 minutes now. I'm going to get to the 2-hour point. I might as well make a documentary of stuff that I talk about all the time. But anyways, thank you very much. And I'm just going to shut my loud mouth and we'll give it a bit of a rest for now. So I'm just making up for those few months where I wasn't posting, in just 1 or 2 different videos. So thank you very much. God bless, and take care, everyone. Keep on rocking in the free world. Peace.